What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you a video to the channel that, quite frankly, we've been talking about these guys for quite a while. We just haven't really numerically assessed them on a actual rankings basis yet. So today, we got our quarterback rankings, our official 2021 NFL Draft quarterback rankings. We are going to be going through our top 5 quarterbacks going into the draft, maybe talking about a couple sleepers afterwards. Aside from that, before we get into it, Corey, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, you talked about it. We've done mock drafts. We've talked about these guys in prospect battles. Now we're officially going to rank them. If you guys want access to all of our rankings, every position, rookie, dynasty, all that stuff, the draft guide, you can see it on the screen right now, is live at thefantasystockexchange.com. We're continuously adding to that thing. We're going to be continuously adding to it. Once the NFL draft has actually taken place, we'll have like winners and losers type content in there and talking about all the landing spots and assessing them. And of course, we'll always have you covered here on YouTube as well. So as Danny mentioned, 2021 NFL draft quarterback rankings from a fantasy perspective, and we'll probably throw in a sleeper each. Just some names to keep an eye on, depending on their draft capital. They might be interesting as well.
For sure. With that being said, gonna hit the intro on y'all. Okay, so as we were mentioning prior to hitting the intro, we're going to talk about our top 5 quarterbacks in the draft, including those sleepers. Before we get into that, as you guys can see, got rid of the mucky beard, cleaned up a little bit, freshened up. You know how it is. But talking about fresh, this quarterback is definitely fresh. And this quarterback
can't even grow facial hair.
Yeah, it sounded like Tyler. No, I'm kidding. We're going to start off with the first quarterback, the guy that's going to go first overall in the NFL draft, both of us having him as quarterback 1, and that's going to be Trevor Lawrence from the Clemson Tigers. You talk about a prototype quarterback prospect. This is the guy you envision. This is the guy you get your clay, you build it. This is the guy. He's the guy that from the lab. He's Frankenstein because he is 6'6", 225 pounds with a huge arm, great movement ability, and head up. Probably the smartest overall quarterback in this class. What this guy does from an overall traits and intangible standpoint really goes unmatched from, quite frankly, in my opinion, a quarterback I've seen in maybe since Andrew Luck, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and if you guys follow me on Twitter, you guys know that I wrote an article for the Fantasy Scouts basically talking about the anatomy of a fantasy quarterback, what makes the best quarterback prospects coming out of school. And in that article, if you got to the end, I broke down the metrics that I talked about in that article about this year's quarterback class. And there was 2 quarterbacks in this class that hit every single metric. And Trevor Lawrence was one of them. And not only did he hit every single metric, he killed every single metric. Because when you look at draft capital, like he's going to go first overall. So he's got that in spades. When you look at yards per attempt, he's been one of the most efficient passers of the football since he's been at Clemson. Completion percentage, usually the benchmark is 60%. He's up in the 67% area for his career. Then when you look at quarterback rating, almost over 90, which is great. Career pass attempts, you usually want a quarterback that's over 400 pass attempts. He's got 1,200. He's got so much experience playing the position. And then highest rushing yards in a season, you generally want over 400. He had over 500 in 2018. So this is a guy that can basically get things done with his arm. From a fantasy perspective, we want quarterbacks that can create big plays, create plays outside of structure, and create plays with their legs. And Trevor Lawrence basically hits every single box that you can want out of that. Now, there's obviously going to be a second part to this. As I talked about in our draft guide on the kind of what makes a quarterback series, I also delve in deep to landing spot and why landing spot is so important. And this is my issue with Trevor Lawrence, right? Because we know he's going to Jacksonville. They're not going to pick Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, the first overall pick. They're going to pick Trevor Lawrence. So it's really up to us. For the other quarterbacks in this class, we'll probably talk about their best fits or whatever, but we know where this guy's going. So what are your thoughts on Jacksonville? I've already made my thoughts pretty clear on the landing spot.
It is a very sketchy spot. If you guys have actually been cluing into the cycle, Urban Meyer has already complained about how NFL free agency works because, he just can't go to someone's house, maybe have a sleepover with them, basically how he was used to with Ohio State in recruiting. Because let's be honest here, a lot of these guys in free agency already have an idea of what they want and what they're looking for from a spot. So quite frankly, you've noticed it multiple times throughout this cycle. guys won't even meet with teams. Guys will just say, oh, you know what? This team needs me. This team's willing to give me this amount of capital to sign. I'm going to sign with them. And if you're Urban Meyer and your best ability is your recruiting ability and not even being able to get the chance to bring guys in, it is somewhat concerning to kind of understand what he's going to be doing from a team building perspective. Not to mention, I mean, you actually look at the individual moves that they have done, nothing really inspires you from a support standpoint to really be intrigued by Trevor Lawrence. Now, again, like his talent's going to intrigue you regardless, but talking about situation, if a Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance type landed in Carolina, you compare the nest of a Carolina versus the nest of a Jacksonville. I am taking Carolina 10 times out of 10, regardless of our predisposition or predispositioned disparity between the talent of those two quarterbacks. The landing spot makes up for that. Now, we're going to talk about them in space.
One objection that someone might have they might be like, oh, but Trevor Lawrence is so much better than those guys. He's better than them, but he's not so much better than them. Those guys are great prospects. And like Danny just said, if any of those guys land in a way better situation than Trevor Lawrence, and I do think, honestly, by the looks of it, Jacksonville might be the worst landing spot. There's a reason they had the number one overall pick. I actually think the Jets might even be a bit better of a landing spot based on their coaching staff that they're assembling, the system that they're going to be running there with Mike LaFleur. Now, if Zach Wilson goes to the Jets, I'm not going to rank him over Trevor Lawrence because Trevor Lawrence is a better prospect, and it's kind of a net negative landing spot for both guys. So in that case, I would favor Trevor Lawrence. But like you said, if he goes to a Carolina, if he goes to a San Francisco, even if he goes to Atlanta with Justin Fields or Zach Wilson, one of those guys, it is going to be hard to favor a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who is more physically talented. But we've seen plenty of talented quarterbacks flame out in the NFL because they didn't have the coaching staff, the weapons, the protection to help make them successful.
Exactly. And I mean, and if you're comparing it from just a basis to basis standpoint, fantasy football, we're not necessarily looking at times for the most talented player at the quarterback position. We look for the guy that's going to get us the most fantasy points. And if, let's just say, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville versus Justin Fields in Carolina, Justin Fields has so much potential to be a top 5, top 3 type fantasy football quarterback. He's got the legs, reported 4.41 time. He's got the arm. He's got the weapons. You look at it from a standpoint that, well, heck, look at the top 5 quarterbacks in Dynasty fantasy football right now, for example. People want to talk about old Dak. He's not that good. Well, he's got weapons and he is good. Justin Fields is good. He'll have weapons. Maybe Dak isn't as talented as, let's just say, Aaron Rodgers.
Deshaun Watson.
I that one's a little watch.
But like that's
we'll just say,
right?
yeah.
Like you look at the top fantasy quarterbacks in Dynasty, and you look at guys like Patrick Mahomes has Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. You look at it across the board, they all have big time weapons, and this is a pretty easy transition. We do have a tie as our quarterback 2 because I have a quarterback 2 that you have as your quarterback 3, and you have a quarterback 2 I have as my quarterback 3. So let's talk about Justin Fields since you already mentioned him. Justin Fields is he's our consensus tied for second, but we're not going to sell any of these guys short because all 4, and we'll get to the 5th guy in a bit, but all 4 of these guys are extremely talented. Justin Fields has every ability to become an elite fantasy quarterback. You mentioned his speed. He's potentially going to crack the 4.3s as a quarterback, which is absolutely absurd. And I compared him to Cam Newton, ran like a 4.5. Like if Justin Fields runs that fast and he's that big of a dude, he can handle the hits of a running quarterback. Just think of the potential for rushing yards. We saw what Lamar Jackson did 2 years ago when he was clearly the fantasy MVP that season for where you drafted him. Justin Fields has like 10 rushing touchdown, 8 to 1,000 yard type potential as a runner, let alone what he can do as a passer.
Yeah. And actually, Lamar Jackson's a perfect example of the point I was making where you look for the spot, you look for the potential fantasy points as opposed to just the talent. Now, if someone's going to say, oh, Lamar Jackson, he's not the most talented passer. Guess what? He's an elite fantasy quarterback because what he can't do with his arm, he does with his legs. So the system around him is what makes him prosper. Anyways, let's get into Justin Fields. Let's just say from a standpoint, he is, inconsistent from the passing game. Let's just say hypothetically coming into the NFL. He's going to have immediate fantasy success. Guess why? Because his legs are so good compared to what we've seen come out in really recent years. I mean, you're mentioning guys like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. That is the level of mobility that you are getting with a Justin Fields. This is a guy you mentioned, low 4.4s, high 4.3s. He can very well crack that type of range. You mix that with this absolute howitzer. I mean, put it on full display against Clemson, that 60-yard bomb everybody has flashing in their head right now when they remember that game. Justin Fields may be the most highest ceiling quarterback in this class simply because he has every single tool in his tool bag. You talk about the on the run ability, you talk about the arm strength, you talk about the velocity, the zip, talk about the mobility. Justin Fields has every single bit that you look for in fantasy superstardom. The problem that's really affecting Justin Fields in the minds of many is that he doesn't really put it on full display at times. He's inconsistent at times. We've seen, again, Northwestern game is a prime example of that. However, when this kid is on his game, he has legitimate quarterback one on the week level potential. And you can't say that for many guys coming out of college, going into the NFL. Justin Fields, you can absolutely say that about. And that is why he is my fantasy football quarterback too, going into this cycle.
Yeah, and I didn't make this disclaimer early. You guys have heard us talk about landing spot like 7 times already.
Yes.
But Zach Wilson, if he goes to the Jets, he will not be my QB2 anymore. It will probably be Justin Fields. And he might even be my QB1, depending on where he goes. So, like we've already talked about it with Justin Fields. I mentioned in that article that I said Trevor Lawrence checked every box. Well, Justin Fields was the only quarterback that checked every box, not named Trevor Lawrence in that article. So he has a lot of career pass attempts. He had a higher QBR actually career-wise than Trevor Lawrence. And I think his accuracy when it's on is actually better than Trevor Lawrence's. And if you think about all the complaints about Justin Fields, right? He doesn't throw with anticipation. Maybe he's a little inconsistent. His accuracy, his mechanics get away from him. But all of those things that I just mentioned are coachable. If he has a great coaching staff around him, if he has a Joe Brady, for example, and Arthur Smith, someone who knows how to get the best out of quarterbacks. We saw what Arthur Smith did with a castaway and Ryan Tannehill. Then you know that Justin Fields is going to be able to adjust those issues, especially if he has a year to sit behind Matt Ryan in that system or even a couple of games to sit behind Matt Ryan in the NFL. I think Justin Fields has the highest potential of any quarterback in this class, and I am including Trevor Lawrence in that statement.
Agreed. I mean, as much as I love Trevor Lawrence, I think he's very much more refined than Justin Fields is now, very much more consistent, and the ceiling is high in his own regard. Justin Fields, if he reaches his full potential, I honestly see like a Deshaun Watson, a Patty Mahomes to a degree. Not again, like nobody's going to equal that type of level, but just going to show. I compared
him to your boy, man. I compared him to your Cowboys.
That's another one.
Dak Prescott is who I compared him to. I also compare him to Cam Newton. Like that kind of potential. All of those guys that we've all mentioned so far have all been top 3 fantasy quarterbacks in a season.
Exactly. So, I mean, you're talking about it. You're comparing them to 3 separate top 5 fantasy quarterbacks in the game right now. That just shows the level of potential that this cat has. Now let's get into your quarterback too. My 3, I'm going to be talking about Zach Wilson from BYU. And we're splitting hairs here. As much as I love Justin Fields, let's not take anything away from Zach Wilson. He is the most efficient, consistent passer in this entire class. Corey, this is your boy throughout the cycle. You can take it away and start off with why Zach Wilson should be, honestly, the most ready contributor to start the season.
Yeah, I think, I guess when you look at his landing spot, it's looking more and more likely like he's going to the Jets. And this isn't Adam Gase's Jets. So it's not a death sentence that Zach Wilson is going to the Jets. Mike LaFleur runs the same system that San Francisco runs. And back in like January, when we thought Zach Wilson was going to be the 4th quarterback off the board potentially, we were all like, yo, get him to San Francisco, get him to San Francisco. We're all going to love that. Now. But there's no chance he gets there now. But if he goes to the Jets, and they build around him, which they've already done so. They've already added a guy like Corey Davis. They were already trying to get Juju Smith-Schuster, which means they might not be done adding pieces to that offense, and they also could be aggressive in the draft. Maybe they add a Travis Etienne, who's also a great fit for a Mike LaFleur offense.
Rondale Moore.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Elijah. Yeah.
It's all going to depend what the Jets do, because I think we're speaking almost in absolutes at this point with Zach Wilson going to the Jets, because I do think it's going to happen. And Zach Wilson has all the potential in the world to be. I compared him to Kyler Murray. I don't think he's 5'10". I don't think he's 6'3", which is what he's listed at. I think he's probably like 6'1". He's kind of like a Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray clone. That type of quarterback. He's a schoolyard quarterback. He's a tremendous deep ball thrower.
A little bit of Rodgers to his game too. To be honest,
a little bit of like he can do everything that the other guys can do. The only difference is that he's smaller than them, and he's not probably quite the athlete that Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Trey Lance are. But he's still a good athlete. I still think he can make things happen with his legs in the run game and on the move throwing the ball as well. So he honestly, again, they all bring everything to the table. There's not really anything that these guys are missing. The questions that you hear about Zach Wilson are the level of competition that he played. Obviously, he struggled against Coastal Carolina, but if you actually watch that game,
he didn't
know all of the context of that game. They literally flew to that game with 2 days of rest. and Zach Wilson like nearly brought them back to a drive that ended in a tackle 1 yard short of the goal line on a 95-yard drive with a 2nd and 19 from his own 5-yard line, 30 seconds and 0 timeouts. So he's got the leadership ability. A lot of people question that about him too. I think everything that you think of with Zach Wilson too is all coachable, just like it is with Justin Fields. Again, for the 70th time, if these guys land in great landing spots, it's wheels up for all of them. So these rankings are completely tentative. And I do think these 3 quarterbacks are a little ahead of Trey Lance, the 3 that we've talked about so far. I think Trey Lance is like a smidge behind those guys just because he has a little bit more concerns than the other 3 do. But Zach Wilson, I'm going to say like the Jets are a good landing spot for him. The only problem is how long does it take the Jets to get the infrastructure around him to help him be successful quickly? Because I think Wilson, much like maybe Tua's experiencing right now, could have a bit of a down rookie season and have his value tank a little bit after his first year.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll tell you right now, if you guys are having your startup drafts right off the bat right now, the discrepancy in ADP between taking Trevor Lawrence, where he's going right now, which is a top 15 overall pick, versus these other 3 quarterbacks who, quite frankly, I've seen a lot of mock drafts. They're going in the 4th, 5th, 6th, sometimes 7th round. And that makes no sense to me because we know what Trevor Lawrence is going to be at this point. He's going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar. Any 3 of these quarterbacks, they have an 80, 90% chance of outliving that ADP that they're currently going at. So if you're in your startups right now,
nothing else too, they're going to have 3 years where, like, at least where they're a starting quarterback, which is not something you can say about Jared Goff or Derek Carr or a number of these other quarterbacks. Like even Kirk Cousins. Like Kirk Cousins might not even be a starter in 3 years. So I mean, if nothing else, you're getting guys that have some security. They're on rookie contracts, and they should all go to relatively decent landing spots. There's no like bad landing spots really on the board right now. There's no like Arizona Cardinals of a couple of years ago when Rosen got drafted there. So
oh god, you remember that?
Yeah. So I think these guys are all in great position to succeed. And if you're in a super flex league, really prioritize these quarterbacks. I've said it once before. I'll say it again. This is the best fantasy quarterback draft of all time. And I say fantasy because these guys very well could end up being better fantasy quarterbacks than real life NFL quarterbacks. And that's okay. Like we saw Mitch Trubisky's had a top 12 or a top 8 quarterback season in points per game, a top 8 quarterback season in 2018. So
I was about to say that,
if Zach Wilson gives you that at the value he's going at, that's honestly fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just the value discrepancy right now is insane to me because there's a supposed gap in talent. When you actually compare the landing spots, it's a no-brainer for me. Anyways, Zach Wilson, you talked about it. You hit the nail on the head, as I like to say. This cat just knows how to operate outside the pocket. You talk about his deep ball. You talk about his accuracy, the consistency. This guy just has a plan when he's outside of the pocket and makes it happen. You've seen it multiple times. You've seen the poise. You've seen just the sheer composure that he plays with in those sheer high-intensity type moments, making plays, setting guys up. I mean, there's no quarterback that can improvise in this class like Zach Wilson. And as much as I like Trey Lance, our 4th quarterback, there is a little bit of a tier gap right here simply because we haven't really seen Trey Lance play high-level football.
We haven't really seen
over
Trey
a year.
Lance play.
Yeah, I mean,
like he's played 1 game in like 18 months.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, he's the clear-cut 4 for us, in our opinion. What he doesn't have with, again, I don't even want to say he's not NFL ready because I think from a mechanical standpoint, he's very clean.
More mature than I thought he would be, but he is still behind these guys, especially in some of the areas that some of these guys are very good in. Like Zach Wilson throws a tremendous deep ball, and Trey Lance does not. He struggles with it sometimes.
Placement at times,
Yeah, and same with Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields throws a great deep ball as well, and I think Trey Lance is behind him in that aspect as well. Real quick, if you had to rattle off like the top 3 landing spots for both Fields and Wilson, what would you say they would be?
Carolina, Atlanta, and well, I mean San Francisco, but that's not really realistic.
I mean, they could get aggressive and move up to like 5,
I guess, but let's just say for purpose sake, they can't make a move up. I don't think Denver would be a bad spot either. I think Denver would be a great spot if they made a move up. Like, I think personally, out of all the landing spots for Trey Lance,
Denver's probably 3.
Denver makes the most sense for me for Trey Lance. Yeah. Denver makes the most sense. I think, he's going to play in that high altitude. He's going to be John Elway's guy. He's got the arm talent. He's got the mobility. And they got ready-made playmakers on the outside to help him succeed. I think Trey Lance paired with John Elway would be a match made in heaven, to be quite honest. I mean, you're talking about Zach Wilson with Mike LaFleur or Kyle Shanahan type. I think Trey Lance with John Elway would be really fun to watch.
Yeah. And then I guess that leaves Justin Fields going to the Falcons or Panthers. Please let let one of these quarterbacks go to the Panthers. That's all I wish. Like, it doesn't even have to be Wilson, who's my favorite quarterback in this class, and maybe not necessarily the best one, but he's my favorite. But if nobody goes to the Panthers and they take Mac Jones, I'm really mad. So Trey Lance, you already talked about him. We'll just kind of transition into him real quick. He has some flaws to his game. Obviously, he played for an FBS school, so he did not play against
FCS,
the level of competition that Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or even Zach Wilson played against. And from an actual game perspective, Trey Lance doesn't have the best deep ball in the world. He does get a little flustered under pressure a little bit, but he does have a lot of very good traits that are very much coachable if he goes to a good situation, as we've pretty much talked about with all these guys. All four of these guys are moldable balls of clay that could turn into absolute stud NFL quarterbacks. And if all of them land in great landing spots, and I wouldn't be shocked if all four of these guys hit. I actually think it is possible. Usually you get one or two of them that are going to miss every year, but if the landing spots are there, they're all going to be good. Anything you got on Trey Lance aside from he brings everything that all the other guys do?
Well, no, I mean, again, specifically with Fields and Lance, you're getting more of a Konami code type quarterback. But that's nothing to take away from Lawrence and Wilson, because I do think they're going to be ready-made contributors.
Dual threats versus mobile. Like those guys are dual threats. Like they can run well. They're not just running to get out of trouble, which I mean, I think Lawrence and Wilson's floor is running to get out of trouble. I think they have a little bit more than that.
Yeah, but I think they could be ready-made.
Lance and Fields should be a feature part of their NFL offense's running game at the next level.
Yes. And I was about to say, I mean, you could be talking about Fields and Lance as being two of the top 5 quarterback rushers for the next 10 years. I think that's a very plausible thing to say. I mean, you're talking about other quarterbacks in that range. Those two, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, would be the type of Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson type. They could definitely be in that type of range given their athleticism, given their potential usage at the next level. Anyways, talking about the Konami code, you talk about the mobile quarterbacks. Let's get into a quarterback that's not really as exciting, but
real quick, you think Broncos are the best spot for Lance? I think
it'd be fun. Yeah,
the one that's really intriguing to me, just because he has the best chance to land in the best landing spot, given where those teams pick in the draft. Right, he has a good chance to go to I think his floor is like San Francisco at 12. I don't even think that's his floor. I think his floor is before that, but I think they're the team floor because they would trade up for him.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're talking about a landing spot for Lure, I think it's 9, to be honest, because I think the Broncos are moving up. I think the Broncos are either moving up or if a quarterback.
Yeah, now that they've signed a corner too, so we could stop giving them corners in the draft.
Yeah. I told you that, by the way.
I know you did. Yeah, and now that they have Kyle Fuller, they signed Kyle Fuller, who's a starting caliber corner, and a good one at that. So they could very much be aggressive and try and get up to 5 or even 3 and try and get one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, heck, let's just talk about their quarterback nest. I know we're kind of going on a little tangent right now. If you're talking about a quarterback nest, they got a ready-made Vic Fangio defense to take the pressure off him, first of all. And when you're talking about the offensive pieces, you got Jerry Jeudy, who was a 15th overall pick last year. You got Cortland Sutton coming back, who had 1,000 yards prior to his injury last year. Noah Fant, one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. Guys like Tim Patrick. You got a ready-made offensive line. I mean, talking about Garrett Bowles really stepped up his play this year. Overall,
the best offensive line in their division, and it's not even close.
Easily. So, I mean, I absolutely love the spot. And if Trey Lance landed here, I think, again, if he gets the majority of the starts year 1, he could be a fringe top 10 type quarterback as soon as he's rookie season, given the rushing output we should expect. So, anyways, we can get into Mac Jones a little bit, the lesser of the 5, the guy that doesn't really have the ceiling of the other 4, we would say, because of the rushing output and because of our supposed or his supposed lack of traits, if you will, compared to the other guys. But I think this guy could be a good quarterback 2-3 type in Superflex for at least the next 4 years. If he lands in a spot in the mid-first round, let's just say hypothetically, the Patriots with those 2 tight ends they signed, Washington, Chicago, I think he could be a solid stopgap type starter for at least his rookie contract. Now, what are your thoughts on Mac Jones?
Yeah, with Mac Jones, obviously you don't get the wow plays that you get from the other guys. You don't get the mobility that you get with the other guys, but he's efficient. He's accurate. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to make reads. The only thing that you worry about with that is that then you really need a good landing spot, right? Because then you need like good coaching. You need to be able to learn the NFL offense fast, because we saw with guys like Dwayne Haskins and Josh Rosen, I don't think those guys have like personal issues that also contributed to them not being good quarterbacks, but those guys didn't have the legs to get them out of trouble early in their careers when their teams were bad. So if Mac Jones doesn't go to a good team or a team that has like a good offensive line, some good weapons and stuff, he might be kind of set up for failure. So the first question is draft capital with Mac Jones, right? Like, does he go in the first round? Does he go high in the first round is very important, because him going in round 1 versus him going in round 2 or 3 is a big difference in terms of his projected hit rate from a fantasy and a real life NFL perspective. But aside from that, he pretty much hits everything in that quarterback article that I did, aside from the pass attempts. So, because he was only basically a 1-year starter. He started a couple games in 2019 when Tua got hurt, but he's basically just a 1-year starter. So you do worry about his kind of, if it takes him longer to learn the NFL speed type of thing, just because he wasn't a starter for very long in college.
I mean, we could touch up upon that a little bit. People love this narrative that Trey Lance is raw, which I disagree with, because I think his mechanics are there. Trey Lance and Mac Jones have basically started the same amount of college games. Yet nobody bats an eye when, Mac Jones is pro ready. Mac Jones is ready to contribute day one. They've started the same amount of college games. So basically, when you're saying one guy's super ready and one guy isn't, you're just telling it yourself. You're just being a hypocrite. I don't understand how Twitter works. Anyways, talking about Mac Jones.
Of course, we can't neglect to mention the fact that Mac Jones obviously had a very easy situation, right?
Yes.
He had Nick Saban as his coach. Steve Sarkisian offense is very easy to operate. Not to mention he had a Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver, Jaylen Waddle, for half the season, and he had a Heisman candidate running back as well. So, I mean, he had a great situation to succeed, and he did just that. He was very efficient, and from a statistical standpoint, he might be the best quarterback in this class just off of this season. His yards per attempt was 11.2, which is two higher than Lawrence and Fields, which is still very good in their own numbers. So, I mean, he was outstanding this year. He posted, honestly, similar numbers to what Joe Burrow did last year, but the only difference I see with Joe Burrow is, one, you could see that Joe Burrow made those players better more so than Mac Jones did. And not only that, but Joe Burrow gave you much more athleticism and mobility, out of structure plays than Mac Jones did, which, I mean, from an NFL perspective might not seem like too big of a difference, but from a fantasy perspective, it's a big difference. So from a fantasy perspective, Mac Jones is not the type of quarterback that we really like to invest in, because he needs that high touchdown percentage, the lot of passing yards, great weapons type of season to be a top 5 quarterback. He needs to have 35, 40 touchdowns in a season to achieve that, because he's not going to give you much with his legs. But at the same time, this guy could be extremely undervalued in Superflex drafts. So don't let him go too late, because some people might just be just write him off if he goes to the Bears or the Washington football team and be like, oh, he's a late 2nd round pick in Superflex. No, this guy's still a borderline 1st round pick if he gets 1st round draft capital.
Yeah, I think, again, this is probably going to be around 203, 204 time type for draft time. He's solid. I mean, I think he could be, again, a fringe quarterback 2-3 for at least the next 4 years, and that's very valuable.
His ceiling's like Matt Ryan, to be honest, but which is
I have
still
Kirk
a good
Cousins.
Quarterback. But Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr is about the type of output you can expect, at least for his rookie contract, assuming he is a 1st round pick like we expect.
Yes, and I mean, if you were to say right now, would you rather have Kirk Cousins or the 203? You would take Kirk Cousins. So, I mean, overall, I do agree. Again, he is a little bit lower than these guys. Let's talk about some of the sleepers, some of the guys that barely missed out on this top 5. I think those 5 are pretty set amongst NFL circles, amongst Twitter circles as well. What are a couple sleepers that we really think are on that fringe? I'll take one. You'll take one. We'll talk about it. So the guy I'll mention quickly is Kellen Mond. I mean, Texas A&M quarterback. This is the ultimate volatile college quarterback, because his highs, man, he's got the athleticism. He's got the arm talent. He's got the sheer traits that you look for, moldable balls of clay that you can take on that day 2 of the NFL draft. The problem is, I mean, his lows, sometimes he just looks like he's on the field and has absolutely no clue what he's doing out there. He doesn't anticipate the defense. He doesn't understand leverage. He doesn't understand separation at times. And that's ultimately what's going to cost him, what takes him out of the top 5. Again, from an NFL prospect standpoint, I think there's a significant gap between the top 4 and 5 and then between 5 and number 6. Now, for fantasy, though, if Kellen Mond gets day 2 capital, if he gets in that late second, early third round area, which I anticipate, and let's just say Washington football team says, you know what, we have Ryan Fitzpatrick for the next year. Let's mold a guy like Kellen Mond who's got the traits to learn behind him for a year and see if he can take over for the foreseeable future. I think that would be a fantastic spot for a guy like Kellen Mond. Because again, you mentioned he's got the arm talent, he's got the mobility, he's got the ability to hit portions of the field that not many guys in the NFL can hit. I just think he's really got to put it all together and really finish his product before we can say he can be a ready-made NFL type starter. I don't think he's close to even touching the field, but once he is at that point, he could be a very viable fantasy football quarterback.
Yeah, and there's a chance that a team talks themselves into Kellen Mond being like Jalen Hurts last year.
Yeah.
It might just be like, hey, Jalen Hurts went in the second round. He had some question marks about accuracy and some of his anticipation and stuff like that, but we can coach that out of him. We let him sit for a little bit of time. And like you mentioned, Washington, he wouldn't have to play right away. So you basically just get to learn and sit behind a guy that has done it before and done it at a pretty high level, to be honest, with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I think, yeah, Kellen Mond is a guy that definitely, and for that being said, both of these guys that we're about to talk about, like, they need to get drafted on day 2, like second or third round pick, most likely, like at the latest 4th round, to be even remotely on anybody's radar. So Kellen Mond, just pay attention to where he gets drafted and where he gets drafted to, because it'll be important and he might have a chance to work his way into a starting role some way down the line. Same goes for Davis Mills. And honestly, Davis Mills, you can just copy and paste everything we said about Mac Jones and just paste it over to Davis Mills. Like, 1-year starter, doesn't really offer too much athleticism, but knows what he's doing, basically. He's a good, crisp passer. He knows how to get the ball to where it needs to be. He can make a little bit more happen outside of structure than Mac Jones can, but Mac Jones just supreme, like, production and the ability that he showed. The ceiling was there with Mac Jones from a college perspective last year, so he definitely has to be behind him, but he's getting third round buzz. He's getting day 2 buzz. And again, if a team talks themselves into him and he gets second round draft capital, he could have a chance to start some ways down the line.
Yeah, and again, like with drafts like this, where there's a clear top 4 and an expected 5th to go in the first round, teams are going to figure that they have to reach on guys if they miss on those top 5. So a guy like Kellen Mond, Davis Mills in typical drafts may be a 4th round type talent. If you're a team like, say, Washington, Chicago, and you're in that second, third round area,
Denver and you missed out on the top
Denver,
guy.
Yeah. If you're in that area, we're like, well, fuck, we missed out on our top quarterback. At least we can take this guy and feel like we got a type of consolation prize. Teams convince themselves of that every single year. And if that happens with a guy like Mond or a guy like Mills, expect them to really get good value in those super flex rookie drafts. Talking about guys that if they get second, third round draft capital, I can very well sneaking into the end of the second round.
And I think Denver is the perfect landing spot for both of these guys, just because with Washington, you figure they're going to be a decent offense, maybe even a good offense with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But with Denver, there's a chance that Drew Lock falls flat on his face, right? So there's a chance that they might want to get these guys in game action to see if they have something going into next year. So they might even be valuable as soon as this year in Denver. So that's why I like that landing spot for them, just because we know Drew Lock doesn't have the longest leash in the world. They might just turn to one of these young guys if they bring him in to give Drew Lock competition, and maybe they hit gold and find a third round franchise quarterback like your boys did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, heck, if you were to ask me when we drafted Dak in the 4th, if I expected one day he would be a top 5 quarterback, I wouldn't have even thought of it. But heck, I can't wait for his MVP this year. Anyways, let's talk about anything else we want to wrap up before we get out of here.
No. So if you guys missed it, we had Trevor Lawrence 1, Justin Fields and Zach Wilson tied for 2. Trey Lance was our quarterback 4 consensus, and then we had Mac Jones quarterback 5, and then Davis Mills and Kellen Mond is our honorable mention. So if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you like, comment, subscribe to the channel. If this was a little bit too much quarterback talk for you, don't worry, we got you covered. We're coming at you with wide receivers on Thursday probably, and then next week we'll have running backs, and maybe we'll even do some tight end talk as well, just because we got to talk about Kyle Pitts at some point. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Peace out. And